The lamp was the last one lit on the wagon box road that Christmas Eve, and I knew that because I had lit it myself, the way I had every winter for 14 years, and the way I would have kept lighting it had a woman in a snow-dusted teacher's cloak not stepped onto my porch at 8:30 and asked, in a voice steady as a tally book, for one meal and a place at the kitchen hearth until first light. I had not heard a knock on that door since the fever winter of '68, when my wife Lenora and our infant son went into the ground inside the same week, and the wreath my hired man Mose hung on the door each December had begun to feel less a welcome than a thing nailed up out of habit. The Vandergrift place ran 14 rooms across 2 wings, and I rattled in it like a stone in a tin cup. Mose slept above the tack room. The cook, Mr. Han, slept off the kitchen. I slept in the small east bedroom because the master room still held a cradle I would not move. So when I heard knuckles strike wood that night, 3 quick, then a 4th that hesitated, I set down the coffee I was not drinking and walked through the front hall in my shirt sleeves to a door I had not opened to a stranger since '71. She was 31 and she did not look it. She looked older through the eyes and younger through the bones. The wind had pasted her hair to the side of her face, and her teacher's cloak was the brown wool kind that had been good wool 10 winters back. She held a satchel in both hands the way a child holds a cup of milk. The snow on her shoulders had set up like flour on a baked good and was beginning to slide. "My name is Cordelia Marsh," she said. "I am the schoolteacher at Wagon Box. The boarding house burned tonight." I had heard the bell from the southwest at 6:30, and Mose had ridden down and come back at 7 saying the Pelton house was gone. Mrs. Pelton was at the doctor's with smoke in her lungs, and the teacher had walked out of town with what she had on. I had thought she had walked toward the rail station. I had not thought she had walked north on the wagon box road 2 miles in the storm. "I do not want money," she said before I had said anything. "I do not want a bed. I would be grateful for a meal and a place at the kitchen hearth until first light, and I will be off the property at sunrise." I have thought about what I said next more times than I can count, because what I said next was simply, "Come inside, Miss Marsh, before you fall down on my porch." She stepped over the sill with the small dignity of a woman who has not eaten since noon and is too proud to say so. I shut the door behind her. Mr. Han was already in the hall, and he looked at me, and I nodded, and he said, "Stew," and went back to his kitchen at a clip I had not seen him use since Lenora was alive. I set her at the long pine table by the kitchen hearth, took the cloak off her shoulders, and hung it on a peg beside my own coat, the way a man hangs a thing he means to dry. She watched me. She did not flinch when I lifted the satchel from her hands and set it on the floor by her boot, because she trusted me with the satchel and she did not trust me with herself, and that was the right order of things. "Mr. Vandergrift," she said when I sat down at the far end of the table, "I will tell you straight. I lost my trunk tonight. I lost my teacher's letters of reference from Boston. I lost the deed to my late husband Thomas Marsh's quarter section on the Sweetwater. I lost the silver thimble that was my mother's. The county committee voted 3-2 on Tuesday not to keep the school open through the winter. I have $12 in my reticule and the cloak on the peg. I tell you this so you understand I am not the kind of caller you may think I am." Mr. Han set a bowl in front of her and a piece of bread on a tin plate. She did not pick up the spoon until I had nodded, and then she ate slowly, in the careful way of a person who has been hungry before and learned not to let it show. I said, "You are the kind of caller I would have wanted to be, the night I had no place to go." She set down the spoon and looked at me for the first time. She had gray eyes that were a steadier color than mine. Behind her, the wreath Mose had nailed up at the kitchen window caught the lamp light on its red berries, and that was the first Christmas thing I had noticed in 14 winters. "I will sleep at the hearth," she said. "You will sleep in the front house wing," I said. "There are 6 rooms in it. They are all made up. Mr. Han airs them every Saturday because Mr. Han is a more hopeful man than I am. I will sleep here in the kitchen where I usually sit until the fire dies anyway. At first light we will think about the next thing." She was about to refuse. I saw her draw the breath. I held up my hand and said, "Miss Marsh, the county will think what it thinks and the county will be wrong about half of it the way the county is wrong about half of everything. I am 56. I have been alone in this house 14 winters. You have walked 2 miles in a wool cloak that is no longer waterproof. There is no negotiation a decent man can offer you tonight other than a clean room, a locked door, and a kitchen between us. Take it, please." She closed her eyes. She opened them. She said, "Thank you, Mr. Vandergrift." Mose came in then with the coal scuttle and stopped when he saw her. I did not have to explain anything to Mose. He set the scuttle by the hearth, touched his hat and said, "Ma'am." He looked at me. "I will ride down at first light, Mr. Vandergrift, and see what is to see at the Pelton place." "Ride at first light," I said. Mr. Hen walked to the front house wing with a lamp and a kettle to lay a fire in the parlor stove. Cordelia Marsh ate her stew. When she was done, she said, "May I ask you one question, Mr. Vandergrift?" "You may." "Why did you open the door tonight?" "I'm not a quick-spoken man," I said, "because I have lit that porch lamp every night since '68, and I have wondered every one of those nights what I would do if a thing knocked on it. I am glad it was a person, Miss Marsh. I am glad it was you." She did not answer. She picked up the satchel, set her hand against her own cheek a second, and stood. Mr. Han was at the door of the front house wing with the lamp. She followed him. I sat at the kitchen table a long time after that. Then I put on my coat and hat, saddled the steady bay, and rode south on the wagon box road to the Pelton place, because Mose had not told me whether anyone had walked the ashes after midnight to look for a silver thimble that had belonged to a teacher's mother. I walked them in the dark with a lantern in one gloved hand and a stick in the other, slow in a grid the way you walk a creek bed for a calf. I found her trunk hinge. I found the iron heel of a boot that was not hers. I found at the place where the kitchen had been a small flattened thing the color of the moon and the shape of a sewing thimble. I laid it inside an empty tobacco tin and put the tin in my coat. Then I rode home. It was 4:45 when I came back. Cordelia Marsh's lamp was out. I sat down at the pine table and wrote 2 papers. The first I wrote on ranch stationery. It read in plain English that I, Holt Vandergrift of Vandergrift Cattle Company in the county of Sweetwater, did this 25th day of December grant to Mrs. Cordelia Marsh, schoolteacher, the unrestricted use of the front house wing of the Vandergrift residence for the duration of the winter, the rooms hers with key and lock, with the express condition that she owe me no debt of any kind, that she be free to walk at the spring thaw, and that no claim be made on her person or her name by reason of this grant. I signed it, dated it, set my seal on it, and made a carbon. The second I wrote on a half sheet. It was a contract to reopen the wagon box school under her sole supervision through spring term, my personal funds covering her salary at $35 a month, and the heating and the coal at $35 more, payable to her account at the bank, the school under her name and the children answerable to her and no one else, the agreement renewable at her word and terminable at her word, and binding on me only. I laid the 2 papers on the kitchen table. I set an old wooden tea caddy with a brass clasp beside them, put the thimble in clean paper inside the tobacco tin, the tin inside the caddy, and closed the clasp. Then I went to the small east bedroom and slept 2 hours. At 7 Mr. Han knocked on the bedroom door and said, "Mr. Vandergrift, the lady is at the kitchen hearth." I dressed and went down. She had laid the fire up. She had set the coffee pot. She had her cloak folded over a chair because the wool was dry now. She turned when I came in. She had not slept much. "Good morning, Mr. Vandergrift." "Merry Christmas, Mrs. Marsh." The word stopped on her face the way it stops on a face that has not said it in a long while. I sat down at the far end of the table. I pushed 3 things toward her, the deed paper, the contract paper, and the small wooden caddy. "The first paper," I said, "is yours for the winter. It is the front house wing with a key. I have written into it that you owe me nothing for the use of it, that you are free to walk at the spring thaw, and that no claim of any kind exists on you by reason of it. The second paper is a contract you may sign or burn at your choosing. It reopens the wagon box school under your sole supervision through spring term, my funds, your name. The third thing is in the caddy. Open it." She did not move for a long minute. Then she undid the clasp the way you undo the clasp of a thing that does not belong to you. She lifted the tin out, the paper out, the thimble out. She closed her hand around it. Her hand began to shake, and she put it under the table and held it there until it stopped. She did not weep loud. She turned her face a little toward the wall where Mose had hung the wreath. "You walked the ashes," she said. "At 3 in the morning, yes." "Why?" I said, "Because my wife had a thimble. It is buried with her. I would have walked any house in the territory after midnight to find one." She set the thimble on the table between us. She picked up the deed paper and read it carefully twice. She picked up the contract paper and read it twice. She set them both down. She folded her hands in her lap. "Mr. Vandergrift," she said, "I will sign the school contract. I will accept the use of the front house wing for the winter with the no-debt clause as you have written it. I will keep the thimble." I will not pretend the three things do not weigh more than I can carry at one breakfast, and I will say plainly to you now that I do not want a husband or to be courted, and I do not know yet if I will ever want either. I do not want you to be kind to me toward an end, Mr. Vandergrift. I have not the strength for that. There is no end, Mrs. Marsh. Say that again, please. There is no end. The deed is yours, the contract is yours, the thimble is yours. I will sleep in the east bedroom on the kitchen side. You will sleep in the front house wing on the lock side. We will eat at the kitchen. At the spring thaw you will walk or you will stay, and your walking will not surprise me and your staying will not bind me. That is the whole arrangement. I am too old to bargain, and too tired to want what I have not been asked for. She closed her eyes a long second. She opened them, picked up the pen at her elbow, and signed the school contract in a hand that was neat and steady and clearly a teacher's. She slid one copy back to me. She kept the other. Then she said, "Merry Christmas, Mr. Vandergrift," and she meant it. Mose came in dusted with snow from the second ride, and said the Pelton place was a black hole. The doctor said Mrs. Pelton would be all right, and the town was already on the rumor of where the teacher had gone. I said, "Tell them she is at the Vandergrift place under a deed, and a contract her lawyer may read at the bank on the 2nd day of January." Mose nodded and ate 3 biscuits. Cordelia sat with her hand resting beside the thimble, and her face composed in the way of a woman who has not yet decided whether the world has begun again or not. It had begun again, but neither of us said so that morning. She moved her satchel into the front house wing that afternoon, locked the door behind her, and kept the key on a ribbon around her neck. By New Year's she had reopened the schoolroom in the old Grange Hall, and 17 children walked through the snow to it. On the first day she stood at the front of the room with the brass-clasped caddy on her desk and the silver thimble inside it, and taught arithmetic until noon and reading after. We took breakfast and supper at the kitchen. She rode the buggy to town at noon. In January she put 1/3 of her salary in the bank in her own name and spent the rest on slates and a stove pipe for the Grange Hall. In February, the same county committee that had voted 3-2 against the school came to my office and asked through their chairman, who would not look me in the eye, whether the funds were of a permanent nature. I told him they were of whatever nature Mrs. Marsh wished them to be, and he went away. We did not speak of the spring thaw until the spring thaw came. In March I walked her out to the cottonwoods on the north side of the place to show her the graves and to say the names of Lenora and our son Joseph out loud, because I had not said them out loud in 14 years, and I had begun to fear I would forget how. She stood beside me a long while. Then she said they were loved, because she could tell, and that was the first thing anyone had said to me about them since they had gone into the ground. In April the lilacs in front of the front house wing put out leaves. Cordelia turned her key in the door for the last time as a borrower, walked into the kitchen, and laid the key on the pine table between us. "I will stay through the summer term," she said. "I have not decided after that." I said, "Stay as long as you wish to stay, Mrs. Marsh. Walk when you wish to walk." She picked the key up again and put it back in her pocket. We were married in July under the same cottonwoods at her pace and on her terms. The Methodist Circuit Rider came up to marry us. Mo stood up for me. The schoolchildren made a paper chain that hung in the cottonwoods like a banner. Cordelia carried her mother's silver thimble in the pocket of her wedding dress because she said it had walked the storm with her, and it would walk the next thing too. The deed to the front house wing she tore up that afternoon herself, because she said she did not need a paper that said she was free. She only needed to know she had had one. I am 70 now, and I tell this on my own front porch because the porch is still here, and the lamp is still lit at night, and the wreath still goes up at Christmas. The school still stands at the Grange Hall, and Mrs. Vandergrift walks down to it every weekday morning at 7:45. The cradle came out of the master room the second winter and went to a farm down the road where it was wanted, and we sleep in the master room now, and the small east bedroom is the boys' room, our 2 sons John and Thomas being 13 and 10 this year, and asleep at this hour. The thimble sits on the mantel in a small wooden box with a brass clasp. The deed she tore up I keep the 4 pieces of in a tobacco tin in the kitchen drawer, because she did not say I had to throw the pieces out, and I am a sentimental man for a stoic one. The porch lamp burns yellow tonight against the dark. The wind is up. I will sit out a while longer and listen for the road, because that is what a man does when he has learned that a knock can come, and that the right answer to it is to open the door.